It was a crisp spring morning in New York City, and the halls of NYU Stern School of Business buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in years. Students, professors, economists, journalists, and political analysts all gathered inside the Paulson Auditorium, eagerly awaiting a keynote speech that had already shaken headlines across the globe. Barron Trump, the youngest son of the current president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, was about to deliver his first major public address. The invitation-only event had been cloaked in mystery. No one knew the exact contents of the speech, but the timing was impeccable. Just days earlier, President Trump had announced a massive 245% tariff hike on Chinese imports, reigniting a full-blown trade war between the United States and China. The markets trembled. Wall Street analysts went into a frenzy. Beijing issued retaliatory threats, and global supply chains once again found themselves on the brink. Barron, who had remained largely out of the political spotlight for most of his young life, suddenly emerged as a new voice, sharp, composed, and unexpectedly profound. Now 19 years old and studying economics at NYU Stern himself, he had already built a reputation among his peers as a quiet genius with a surprisingly deep understanding of macroeconomic policy and national identity. The auditorium lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd as Barron took the stage in a sharp navy blue suit. Standing at 6 feet 7 inches, he towered over the podium. But it wasn't his height that stunned the room. It was the calm, unwavering confidence in his eyes. "Thank you, Dean Hamilton, professors, students, fellow Americans." Barron began, his voice steady, his tone presidential. "I am not here today as the president's son. I am here as an American. I am here as a student of economics, and more importantly, a student of history." A few heads tilted in curiosity. This wasn't just another political scion reading from a script. This was someone who had done his homework, someone ready to confront one of the most complex economic issues facing the world today. Barron walked away from the podium, a wireless mic clipped to his lapel, and began pacing the stage slowly. "Let's start with the facts," he said, gesturing to a massive screen behind him. Graphs lit up, decade-long trade imbalances, manufacturing job losses, a collapsing middle class. For over 3 decades, America has been bleeding its industrial soul. We traded factories for stock market points. We traded steel for screens. And we outsourced the very backbone of our nation, not just to anyone, but to the Chinese Communist Party. The crowd murmured. Some students leaned in, eyebrows raised. Others scribbled down notes frantically. It was clear now this wasn't going to be a soft speech. Barron was diving straight into the lion's den. He continued, "Now let's talk tariffs. When my father announced a 245% tariff hike on Chinese imports, the media called it reckless. They called it dangerous. But they forgot to ask one simple question: dangerous to whom? Because it's not dangerous to the small-town American machinist who's finally going to get his job back. It's not dangerous to the American farmer who's tired of competing against foreign subsidized goods. It's only dangerous to the global elite who profit from a weakened United States." Applause erupted. Even some of the more skeptical attendees found themselves nodding. There was something magnetic about his delivery, passionate but controlled, idealistic yet deeply rooted in data and strategy. Barron paused and looked around the room. "What we are doing isn't just about tariffs. It's about reclaiming our national destiny. We are building an America where made in the USA isn't just a slogan, it's a way of life." The cameras zoomed in. Fox, CNN, CNBC, even foreign outlets like BBC and Al Jazeera broadcast the speech live. Social media exploded. Twitter hashtags like #BarronShock and #TariffVision trended within minutes. But Barron wasn't finished. He pointed at another chart, this one showing how China's GDP had been bolstered by the West's hunger for cheap labor. China didn't become powerful on its own. We gave them the fuel, our consumerism, our dependence, our indifference. That ends now. As he closed part 1 of his speech, Barron took a moment to address the students directly. "You, the future of America, must understand this. Globalism without guardrails is a highway to collapse. But patriotism with purpose, that's how nations thrive." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Professors looked at each other in disbelief. This wasn't just a speech. It was a turning point. And Barron Trump had just delivered it. The moment Barron Trump stepped off the stage at NYU Stern, the world was already buzzing. Within 20 minutes, clips of his fiery remarks had gone viral. Conservative commentators hailed him as the future president in training. Even traditionally liberal voices admitted there was something different about this Trump. Barron had spoken not like a politician but like an economist, an industrial strategist, and a national revivalist all rolled into one. And China? Beijing was furious. State-controlled media outlets slammed the speech as arrogant, isolationist, and immature. The Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a blistering response, condemning both President Trump's tariffs and his son's rhetoric as unhinged economic aggression. Within hours, China announced a mirror tariff of 200% on key U.S. exports like soybeans, semiconductors, and aircraft parts. But back in America, something strange was happening. The backlash didn't stick. Even average citizens who normally avoided politics were listening. In diners from Ohio to Iowa, in factory break rooms in Michigan, and in Zoom calls among young entrepreneurs and small business owners, Barron's words were being repeated. His statement, "Globalism without guardrails is a highway to collapse," became the quote of the day. Inside the White House, President Trump was said to be beaming with pride. According to an anonymous source close to the administration, Trump watched the entire NYU speech live with senior advisors and reportedly told Chief of Staff Kash Patel, "He just said what I've been saying for 30 years, but better. That boy is something special." That evening, a primetime panel on Fox News brought in economic strategists to dissect the policy ideas embedded in Barron's speech. He actually laid out a coherent and data-driven case for protectionist nationalism, said Dr. Catherine Walters, a senior fellow at the American Economic Renaissance Institute. It wasn't just populist fluff. He cited specific graphs, addressed currency manipulation, and even explained how supply chains could be restructured internally. Honestly, I'm impressed. Over on CNN, however, the response was mixed. "He's articulate, yes," said progressive analyst Jamal Rodriguez, "but let's not pretend this was a love letter to global cooperation. This was America First nationalism 2.0, and it could seriously damage our standing in multilateral trade deals." But even as critics scrambled to find cracks in the speech, Barron himself had already moved on. Rather than bask in the glow of attention, he returned quietly to his dorm room. Yes, the future face of American economic nationalism still lived on campus like every other student. His roommate, Dylan, later told the press, "Barron's been saying this stuff for months in late-night debates. We'd sit around talking about Friedrich List, Alexander Hamilton's report on manufactures, and even supply chain choke points. Dude's brain is wired like an industrial-era economist with a TikTok edge." Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, the impact of Barron's speech could already be felt. Senator Josh Hawley took to the Senate floor the next morning and cited Barron directly during a debate over tariff policy. "If a 19-year-old student at NYU can understand that we've allowed the CCP to control our essential industries, then what excuse do we have in this chamber?" Even traditionally hesitant lawmakers like Senator Joe Manchin and Representative Tulsi Gabbard issued lukewarm statements supporting at least a temporary realignment of U.S.-China trade policy. But the real shock came when Elon Musk tweeted, "Just watched Barron Trump's NYU speech. Surprisingly sharp. He's asking the right questions about sovereignty and supply chains. This kid's going places. Rocket United States." That tweet alone racked up 2.5 million likes within 12 hours. The global elite, the business moguls, the trade lobbyists, they were rattled. No one expected Barron Trump, the once silent son of America's most polarizing president, to suddenly emerge as a serious thought leader on industrial strategy and geopolitical economics. And Barron? He wasn't done yet. Back at NYU, he sat alone in the university library, writing, planning, sketching out something new. In an email sent to select faculty and advisors that evening, he wrote, "Today I explained the why. Now it's time for the how. I'm drafting a policy blueprint for the American century. The era of dependency is over. It's time to build." The subject line read, "Operation Sovereign Supply, a new vision for the American economy." 3 days after the NYU STUNS speech, a bold new document was leaked, or rather, strategically released, under the title, Operation Sovereign Supply, a strategic blueprint for rebuilding the American industrial core. Authored by none other than Barron Trump, it wasn't just a policy paper. It was a manifesto. At 47 pages long, the document outlined a national strategy so daring and intricate that some described it as Hamiltonian with a modern twist. It called for a total revitalization of American manufacturing, the creation of high-tech industrial corridors, a rescaling revolution, and a return to economic independence not seen since post-World War II America. And it was all in response to the 245% tariffs on Chinese goods recently enacted by President Donald Trump, tariffs that many now saw not as the end goal but as the first salvo in a much grander vision. Barron opened the document with a powerful preface. America's strength was never in how cheaply we could consume, but in how powerfully we could produce. In the past, we sent men to the moon with slide rules and steel. Today, we import smartphones we can't fix. We were never meant to be a nation of dependencies. We are a nation of builders. And it's time to build again. The core components of Operation Sovereign Supply were broken down into 5 major pillars. The redesign of strategic supply chains. Barron proposed reshoring supply chains for critical sectors like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, rare earth minerals, defense manufacturing, and food production. He argued that COVID-19 and now the renewed China tensions had proven that America's supply dependence was a national security risk. The Great Reskilling Act. The blueprint included a bold federal-state partnership to invest in vocational training centers, AI-driven skill assessments, and corporate apprenticeship programs. His language was clear: we don't need more sociology graduates who can't pay off loans. We need machinists, coders, toolmakers, engineers, and dreamers who can build this country from the ground up. Tax incentives for homegrown innovation. Operation Sovereign Supply proposed generous tax breaks for companies that manufactured goods domestically, especially in Rust Belt 2.0 zones, targeted regions across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana where factories had once stood tall. Industrial corridors and national infrastructure revival. Modeled in part after Eisenhower's interstate vision, Barron's plan proposed a national network of advanced manufacturing corridors, linking research universities, clean energy plants, AI-driven factories, and logistics hubs. The American Standards Doctrine. In a surprising twist, Barron went further than economic strategy, calling for a cultural renaissance. This doctrine would push for labeling not just made in USA, but built to last in America, holding domestic producers to high standards of durability, ethics, and environmental sustainability. If we're going to outcompete China, we don't do it by being cheap. We do it by being better, he wrote. The reaction? Explosive. Senator J.D. Vance quickly endorsed the blueprint. Barron's got vision. This isn't kid stuff. It's a roadmap for economic sovereignty, he said on the Senate floor. Tucker Carlson, returning to the spotlight with a new independent media platform, dedicated an entire episode to the blueprint titled, "The Barron Doctrine, A New Industrial Revolution?" He told viewers, "This kid isn't just talking about the past. He's dragging us into a bold, self-reliant future. And he's doing it while half of Washington is still asleep." Economists around the world scrambled to analyze the document. Harvard Business Review ran an emergency roundtable. Nobel laureate economists debated the long-term viability of Barron's proposals. One French economist even admitted, "For a teenager to write this, it is formidable. America might just be awakening." But not everyone was applauding. Over at the World Economic Forum, whispers emerged that Barron's plan would isolate America from multilateral cooperation. The European Union warned that if the U.S. proceeded with aggressive protectionism, retaliatory measures could be considered. In Beijing, the CCP-controlled media accused Barron of leading a generational crusade of economic nationalism, calling him a young architect of Trade War 2.0. They even aired a dramatized propaganda segment of Barron portrayed as a cartoon villain disrupting global harmony. Back in the U.S., President Trump, never one to let opportunity go to waste, called a surprise press conference. Standing at the White House podium, he beamed and said, "My son Barron has laid out something incredible. It's smart, it's strong, it's beautiful. Just like America will be again. We're looking into implementing pieces of it immediately. Frankly, the kid might be the next genius of our time." And just like that, Barron Trump was no longer a quiet student. He was a national force, a policy thought leader, and potentially, as whispers in D.C. began to speculate, a future political candidate in the making. But there was more to come. And in the next part, Barron would face the ultimate test, a public showdown on national television, live in front of 80 million viewers. A week after releasing his policy blueprint, Barron Trump received an invitation that would put his ideas and his composure to the ultimate test. The setting? A live, primetime town hall hosted by ABC News, titled America at the Crossroads, Tariffs, Trade, and the Trump Doctrine. The guest list was stacked. Economists, policymakers, professors, media heavyweights. And in a twist that captured the public's attention, Barron Trump, only 19 years old, was slated to debate Dr. Evelyn Zhao, a globally respected economist from Stanford and former World Bank advisor, known for her unwavering commitment to free trade and globalization. 80 million people tuned in. The stakes? Nothing less than the ideological soul of America's future. The moderators opened with a sharp question. Mr. Trump, your father's administration just levied the most aggressive tariffs on Chinese imports in modern history. Critics say this is economic suicide. Your response? Barron didn't blink. He leaned forward, locked eyes with the moderator, and spoke with crisp precision. What's economic suicide is relying on a hostile foreign power to supply us with everything from antibiotics to circuit boards. What's suicide is letting our heartland rust while we enrich nations that undercut wages and weaponize trade. These tariffs aren't punishment. They're realignment. A wake-up call. And America is finally waking up. Applause exploded through the room. Dr. Zhao countered swiftly, but Mr. Trump, supply chains are global for a reason. Efficiency lowers costs. Your plan raises prices on American families, especially the poor. Barron didn't flinch. Global efficiency doesn't mean national security. We've outsourced everything, including our resilience. We've seen what happens when pandemics hit, when war breaks out, when ships stall in canals. The cheap now, crisis later model is over. As for the poor, they're paying the real price in lost jobs, collapsed towns, and broken futures. My plan isn't about prices. It's about dignity. The room fell silent. Even Zhao paused. The moderator pivoted. Let's talk jobs. Your blueprint calls for a res-killing revolution. Sounds great, but how do you fund it? Barron, smiling slightly, answered. We claw back the billions wasted on international development programs that don't benefit Americans. We cut subsidies to bloated bureaucracies and redirect them to communities in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. We incentivize corporations to train their workers instead of outsourcing to Shenzhen. We don't need more government. We need targeted willpower. At that moment, Twitter nearly exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Barron vs. Zhao, hashtag sovereign supply, and hashtag Trump Doctrine 2.0 trended globally. Celebrities chimed in. Even rapper Kanye West posted. Kid got bars? And he's spitting truth. Hashtag Barron 2028. Dr. Zhao attempted a pivot to climate policy. Your manufacturing revival relies on steel, oil, and domestic factories. Isn't that anti-environment? Barron nodded and flipped the frame. Not if we innovate. America can build clean. It's China polluting the oceans, violating emissions treaties, and running coal plants like it's 1920. We should be producing green tech here under our laws, not importing solar panels made by forced labor. Thunderous applause. Then came the final question, the one no one expected. The moderator asked, Mr. Trump, you've become the unexpected face of a growing movement. You're intelligent, composed, and clearly have a vision. People are asking, are you considering public office? The audience leaned forward. Barron looked up, paused, and then said, I didn't set out to be a politician. I'm still learning. Still studying. But if no one else has the courage to say the hard truths, to fight for the future my generation deserves, then yeah, I might just have to step up. Standing ovation. Even some skeptics stood. Even Dr. Zhao smiled respectfully and offered a handshake. Overnight, polling showed a 60% approval rating of Barron's economic vision, including 42% of independents and even 22% of Democrats. Cable news was ablaze. A Newsmax headline read, Barron Trump, the prodigy who shocked the world. Meanwhile, MSNBC reluctantly admitted, say what you want, but he's not his father's echo. He's his own force. Late that night, in a quiet NYU dorm room, Barron sat alone again, watching replays of the debate. His phone buzzed endlessly, offers from think tanks, networks, advisors. He turned it off. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed the title of his next idea. The American Renaissance, Beyond Tariffs Toward Greatness. Because for Barron Trump, the tariffs were just the beginning. 3 weeks after the debate, Barron Trump stood before yet another crowd, but this time, the stakes weren't symbolic. They were real. He had just been invited to speak at the White House Economic Council Summit, representing the voice of America's next generation. President Donald Trump himself introduced him before stepping aside. As Barron approached the podium in the East Room, the cameras rolled live on every major network. Senators, CEOs, diplomats, even Elon Musk all sat silently. The gravity of the moment was undeniable. This wasn't just a speech. This was a passing of the torch. Ladies and gentlemen, Barron began. What started as a conversation at NYU STUNS has grown into something far bigger than me. I represent a generation that refuses to inherit a broken system. We demand more than slogans. We demand solutions. He outlined what he called the 4 pillars of the American Renaissance. Pillar 1, sovereign manufacturing. The tariff hikes on Chinese goods are the starting line, not the finish. It's not about isolation. It's about independence. We're going to build again. Not just cars and steel, but microchips, medicines, solar cells, and satellites. Right here. In America. Because national security isn't just about missiles, it's about machines, metals, and microprocessors. He announced a proposal to create a new public-private partnership dubbed Forge America, aimed at investing in emerging industries operated by American workers with priority contracts for companies headquartered in the U.S. Pillar 2, Patriot Tech. We need to stop being digital tenants in a house owned by Beijing. The AI, quantum, biotech, and cybersecurity revolutions must be led by Americans for Americans. It's time to end our reliance on apps and platforms that answer to communist regimes. He called for investment in freedom-based tech platforms, tax incentives for startups that manufacture their hardware domestically, and stricter privacy laws for foreign-made software. Pillar 3, the reskilling surge. You can't have a renaissance without the people. College debt is suffocating us. Degrees that don't lead to jobs are draining our potential. We're going to flip the model. Barron proposed a federal skills credit, a new initiative that would fund short-term, high-impact training in coding, welding, data science, green energy, and advanced robotics. In exchange, graduates would commit to working in US-based industries for at least 3 years. Let's stop pretending everyone needs to read Foucault and start helping Americans build things again. That line drew thunderous laughter and applause even from skeptical academic elites in the crowd. Pillar 4, economic nationalism with global dignity. We don't want to dominate the world. We want to inspire it. Fair trade, not free-for-all trade. If countries want to do business with America, they must respect the same standards we hold ourselves to: labor laws, environmental rules, anti-corruption measures. He paused for emphasis. America will no longer be the wallet that funds sweatshops, environmental devastation, and state-sponsored surveillance. As the final minutes of his speech approached, Barron did something unexpected. He invited a guest on stage, a laid-off steelworker from Pittsburgh, a single mom, and a recent graduate of a vocational training program that had just hired her into a 3D printing startup. This is who we're fighting for, he said, placing his hand on her shoulder. Not hedge funds. Not foreign regimes. Her. Millions like her. That's the future we're building. The audience rose. Every single person. A standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. In the hours after his White House appearance, Barron Trump's speech went viral globally. Even in Beijing, citizens found ways around the firewall to watch clips on social media. In Germany, a pro-worker party cited his ideas during an economic debate. In India, a tech entrepreneur praised his bold and honest message. And in America? In the hours after his White House appearance, Barron Trump's speech went viral globally. Even in Beijing, citizens found ways around the firewall to watch clips on social media. In Germany, a pro-worker party cited his ideas during an economic debate. In India, a tech entrepreneur praised his bold and honest message. And in America? The mood was changing. Fast. Blue-collar Democrats, conservative populists, Gen Z independents, people who'd never aligned before, now shared a common rallying cry: bring America back. Meanwhile, CNN reluctantly admitted, Barron Trump is no longer just the president's son. He's a political phenomenon. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page piece titled, From Dorm Room to Doctrine, the Barron Blueprint. Even the New York Times gave a rare, if begrudging, nod. Love him or hate him, you can't ignore him. He's got the youth, the smarts, and a message that's cutting through decades of noise. That evening, as Barron sat with his family in the White House residence, President Trump turned to him, a smile creeping onto his face. You did good, son. Maybe better than I ever did. Barron chuckled. That's a dangerous thing to say to a guy with ambition. Melania, watching silently, leaned in and asked, so, what now? Barron stood, gazed out the window toward the Washington Monument, and answered, "Yeah? We build. We fight. We lead. Because the Renaissance has already begun and I'm not backing down."